Hello. I wanted to have another session to review Adobe XD and kind of build on top of that first tutorial. First, we'll do a review. We'll take a look at a design pattern for social media login, and then we will look at using components, which are new to Adobe XD, this current iteration. I want to remind you that I think the best tutorials that you can find are in two places. First and foremost, if you go to help.adobe.com/xdtutorials.html. These tutorials are really nice. They're good examples of what I call micro-learning. They're kind of chunked into smaller videos. And if you work through them, I think after this video, you should be able to actually dive into any of these videos, and you have the fundamentals of understanding what they're explaining to you, even the new concepts. And then the other area is to go to Adobe XD Learn, and this is, I think, the new learning portal, and they're still working on it, but there are some short, featured topics that you can review, and then there are also tutorials that go into detail, like prototyping 101, how to work with audio, how to animate a flyout menu. That's a good one, so I would take a look at that one. And let's see, this one comes with a nice video, and I think that, if I'm not mistaken, they give you the file. Maybe not, maybe you just get to see the video. Well, in some cases they give you the files and the resources you need. So, with that said, let's take a look at and review the XD file that we worked on last week and the Camp Vibes site. I want to point out, I forgot the name, I'm getting old. I want to make sure that you have the Yosemite.zip file, and it will include the photos, the Illustrator file that I used to create the red circle, SVG that we're going to actually import into XD. So given that you have those, let's just do a quick review. And I'm not going to review the interface as much as I'm just going to dive right in. And what we'll do is we're going to kind of just review. So this is the nice tutorial that I gave you a week or two ago. And it includes Camp Vibes. And the first thing is we've already made this artboard, which is the splash screen. What we're going to do is we're going to work with that a little bit later, and we're going to use this social media design, login design pattern, probably what we see at Foursquare. We'll try to mimic that. So I'll come back to that. But what I want to do first is to review. And so one of the things that we talked about last time is that XD has some great features for masking. It's very simple, and if I want to mask or add this image to this circle here, I could simply drag the image from my folder right into the circle. So there's Curtis about probably 20 years ago with hair. That's a handsome guy. And I drag and drop it, and it automatically masks my folder. Okay, so now let me ask you, what is that blue line right there? Why is that blue line there? I'm going to get rid of that. And I want to know, when I click on the artboard, and it's sometimes hard to select the artboard, the best way is to click on the title. But when I click on the artboard, see that little divider there? Well, that divider shows you the bottom of the viewport. So the viewport is set to 667, and I think this is for the iPhone 8. And so anything below the fold, that's like you would consider a page fold. Anything below the fold is actually what would display for scrolling. And so because we have Why is it appearing now? So if we look at this side panel here, we can see that it appears because we've enabled vertical scrolling. So if I say none, it goes away. And so your artboard can be larger than the viewport. So if I set that vertical and say vertical, it will default to the height of the viewport, but I can set it to 667, and that's because we messed around with it, right? And so that kind of gives us an idea. That also means that our splash screen, our logo, we probably need to move it up, and we're going to do that when we get to the social media login. Okay, so we have a good idea there, and as we get to, when we look at the adventure slide, and what I want to do is jump over to slide 5. So this is a blog, right? And like any blog, you're going to have different blog posts. And so let's zoom in here a little bit better. And what I want to do is I basically want to have about maybe 5 or 6 of these guys, right, on this particular page. And so how do I do that? Well, there's vertical scrolling is already set, and so the viewport height is there. If I wanted to quickly clone this, how do I do that? What do I do? All right, there's a feature called Repeat Grid right here. If I click on Repeat Grid, then you'll see that we get a horizontal handle, or we could repeat horizontally, or we can repeat vertically. So let's repeat vertically and down to the bottom of the artboard, so that when we scroll, we get some scroll features. And that is nice. And so basically it repeats the component, and they actually become independent components. But before we mess around with turning off and editing individually, one of the nice features in XD is if we can find basically, let's click and select more images that we can drag and drop. If we drop them, then XD then interpolates and it pastes all those images in sequentially. And then from that point, then we can go in and we can edit them. Like we can change this to half dome. So that would be the blog post on half dome. And then this would be Mirror Lake. Anyone know where this is? I don't think that's Glacier Point. I think that's the park entrance. And this would be in Little Yosemite Village, which I don't know if they still call it that since it's been purchased. So now what we did is we repeat grid to clone this thing. We dropped all our pictures in, and because we can edit them individually, we changed the text. And now this artboard is pretty much done, unless we want to link these to separate artboards, etc. All right, so that's pretty good. So far, so good on the review. And all right, and so if we go to this one, and we select this artboard, we haven't turned on scrolling, so let's go ahead and turn that on. And see how it defaults to the height, but we can set it. We'll set it there ourselves. So we got vertical scrolling, so that was a good review of how to enable it again. And then down here, we've got a couple of artboards that we're going to work with. And we're going to finish our prototyping, but there's something missing from these artboards. And I want to kind of zoom, I'll give you a hint. If we zoom in and we look at here, specifically the photo, and then we go back and look at this, these two artboards, Featured Park and Said River, there's some stuff missing. what's missing in terms of what would appear kind of as global control in the smartphone's UI. And so we'll come back to that. No, I won't come back to it. Do you see it? What's missing is the carrier bar, right? So before we talk about the carrier bar, let's talk about components. So components are reusable objects, right? So if we go here and we go to our assets and we look, we see we have our fonts, and I got some missing fonts, and we've got our color palette that we can set here, character styles that are missing. Down here you have components. There's nothing there because we haven't created anything. And what I mentioned to you is that XD is SVG friendly. And so what we want to do is, place some location markers, like right here. Imagine that we have some location markers, and then what we'll do is we're going to place a location marker for the Merced River, which is right here in this little oaky drawing, and we're going to have that marker go to this card. So the first thing we need to do is bring the marker in. And so one of the things I like to do is when I'm working in XD, if I'm working with an object or primitive, I will paste it in the infinite pasteboard. Remember, this is called the infinite pasteboard. Then I can edit it. I don't want to edit it on my artboard because that could become problematic depending on how much is there. So, if we know that this is an SVG or a vector graphic, because if I zoom in and I keep zooming in, we can see that line, it looks a little bit like it's pixelating as I zoom in, but look at that, it's not. So I'm zooming out, and then the card is trying to render it, right? So I put a lot of workload on it. What I want to do is make this a location marker. So to edit it, first I have to select it and double click it. And then what I want to do is double click again. You kind of have to hit it again, hit one of the handles. There we go. And then when you see the handles appear, then what you can do is you can edit the object. And what I want to do is first, I want to kind of make it look like a location marker. So I can squeeze it down, and I can pull this down. Now, pull this handle down. See how it's showing me that it's scaling vertically, and it's in proportion in reference to the top handle. If I really want to bring this to a fine point, I can just double click and boom. So now it really looks like a location marker. Pretty simple, right? So double click, and then once you select it, double click again, and then you can do all kinds of things with changing the shape, etc. So just Control Z. There's some pretty nice Boolean tools, if you will, where you can do things like punch and combine, etc. This is a location marker, but what a location marker would probably have another oval, right? So just by default, it looks like you have an oval here. I want to get rid of the border. And so I've got this nice oval, and I think I'll place it. Notice how in XD, as I drag it over another shape, I get an idea of where it sits in reference to that shape, like the left side, top and bottom. So it gives me some reference, and that looks pretty good. Now, I can do some things, like once I select these guys, I can add, which basically adds it to the location marker, right, that we originally had, or I can subtract. Now it looks like a location marker, right? I don't want to do that. I want to Control Z. Or I can go to intersect, and then I'm just going to get a red circle, right? Or I can punch, in which case I get the same effect here, right? Exclude overlap, which really gives me kind of the same effect as subtract. Okay, now that I have that location marker, it's really nice. And the thing is that I might, if I really build this out, I might have like 5 or 6 location markers, right? And I don't want it, I could copy and paste and do it the hard way. Or I could select the object and select Make Component. And so now it's a component. And if we scroll down, there you can see it. And we can rename this thing Location Marker. Now, one thing that XD does, and I think they borrowed this from other prototyping tools, is that it has what is called masters and then instances, if you will. Right now, we're working with a master of the location bar, right? And you can see that it's a master because it has a solid green diamond. So if I take one of these guys out and I clone it, this is basically an instance, and it's because it has this, basically this solid, the white diamond, right? And so if I can do some things like with this thing, I can add text. And so if I want to, or I could even, well, forget the text, I could actually change this one. So basically what I've done is I've broken away from the master. And when I did that, notice that when I changed that inner circle and I moved it, what happened to the diamond? You got this little tiny green dot in it, right? See that green dot? It doesn't scale a whole lot when you zoom in. But what that means is I've broken away from the master, and because I made some edits, and it's independent of the master. Okay, and I think if I go back, I can right click and I can say reset to master state, and it takes it back. But it's still a clone, right? So if I change the master though, if I decide, oh, I'm going to edit the master, this is the master, and I change it, it's not going to let me do it here. I probably have to, I thought I could edit it. I guess I can't once it's the master. So basically the instances you can break away. So you can do some things with the instances and then maybe convert them to components. But to reuse it, once you create the master, delete it, right? Once you create the component and you have a master, and then work with an instance of it. So I'll put this location marker right here. It's tiny, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to, and it still sees it as broken away, but that's okay. I want to take it and I want to drag it. I don't want to select both of these. But I'm just going to drop it about right there. Alright, so that's a good location. So now, what do I want to do? If I want to link from the location marker to the Majestic Merced. Well, I need to be in the prototyping mode, so I'll go to prototyping, and then I'll link to it. See, I get the little caret, and I will drag it, and I'll link to this artboard. And so now, since I'm in prototyping, if they're wired, make sure I select this artboard, and I think I can start from here. And I can preview, and if I click on this, then I get that default transition right over there. So that's how you create a component and how you will reuse those instances. Now I talked about or creating a social media login. So let's take this little thing, which is our infinite workspace, and drag it over just so we have something to look at. We're going to recreate something like this. Now, what I want to do is, I want to challenge you. First thing I'll do, I'm going to move this thing up. And I might scale it down just a tiny bit, okay, because what I want to do, and I need to get out of prototyping mode, is I want to scale it down just a tiny bit, not too much, so that, notice that I can go ahead and select parts of the graphic, right? I want to move it, and I'll go ahead and align it to the top, bring it down a little bit, and then make sure it's aligned with the center. So I'm going to move it down a little bit more. Okay, so this is the splash screen, but there is something that's missing, right? I still have to have that carrier bar. So there it is. This is a good idea to how to quickly make something a component. So we can make it a component, and there it is, right? And that's the master. If we scroll down, we can see now that this is the status bar. It kind of inherits the object name. And so let's go ahead and we could leave that master there, but it'd be good practice not to keep it. We can drag it and drop it, and it's kind of hard to see right here, right? But it's there. And the interesting thing is it didn't snap to the location, and it should. And so, yeah, it should have snapped to the location. Let's click on this one here, fix. So we can say, yeah, we want it fixed position. And then by default, see that when I selected it says component master? Right. So I'll have to check on that and find out what went wrong. But it should snap to the location. Okay, so you're gonna have to do a couple of things here. The easiest thing that I would do is I would use this as an example is to make a button, right? So I would make maybe 3 buttons, but the easiest thing, I'll just make 2, because the easiest thing is to create, and I want the fill to be kind of light gray, right? And I don't want a border. And then maybe I'll have, let's make it a linear gradient. And what I want to do is to make this one a little bit lighter. Right, so how much real estate do I have here? Make it a little bit lighter as we go from light to dark. And so that's a little bit better. And then take this hand on it. So that's a little bit better. Let's make it just a tiny bit longer. And then I'll center it. So, but what I want to do is I want to round it out. So now it's round. And so these buttons are rectangular, but we'll make ours round just to be different. Not that much. That's a little much. How about let's go back. I'll do because I drag so much. Let's do it. Well, okay. It'll be better if I zoomed in. Okay, and then what we'll do is and then I can add some text to it, right? And I kind of have to work with it. If I wanted to do this, I'll just sign. I should make it capital, right? Sign up. Yes. And that's pretty good. That's the color and everything I want. Let me just drag it over. I can group these 2 guys. Or align so that we can both center and then group. And then after the group, I can make a component. Right? That's the master. I don't want to use the master, so I'll do it right. And this is, I'm going to name this large button. And so now I have a large button that I can pop right there. move it up here, sign up with email, and then I could repeat it and bring it out, and then what's going to happen with these guys, right? Is once I repeat, I edit this one, it becomes a breakaway, right? So I could just make this login. And I'll get rid of this. And then how do I know that it's broken away? I click the handle, see it has that green dot, and there is an instance that's still tied to the master. And so let's see, let's make sure that we're above the fold. Then, I don't know, I thought we said that already, but okay. So we're still above the fold, and that's good. So what we can do is bring these guys down a little bit. So if you were going to add a Facebook logo and another button, maybe the same button but with the Facebook logo, you could make the Facebook logo in XD, or what would you do? I'll leave that to you to decide, but I'll give you a hint that there are such things as UI kits. So I hope this helped with the review. I think we covered everything. We wired 2 artboards. You can finish this off by wiring the artboards. If you can get through the process of doing the things like I told you, like working with primitive shapes, creating components, adding artboards, repeat grid, setting your scrolling option and your viewport height, and working with your assets, then you're in great shape. This is about a 30-minute video. I try to keep it a little shorter, but I think I wanted to make sure that I showed you what I thought were some core skills with XD. You should be able to move on and watch those videos that I introduced you to at Adobe. And in the tutorial site, right, go to Learn and Support. You go to Tutorials here, and it takes you here. And you should be able to move forward. At this point, it might be good to just invest a week or 2 into XD before we move on to another tool. Thanks a lot, and take care.